Important that you understand the clinical trial process. I'm not saying that the pill is bad. I just want you to think about how to make health decisions for yourself. You want to be especially vigilant, especially staying on top of it. Once I got the information I needed, I started to move in that direction about how to make health decisions for yourself.
In your mind, what would you say to brothers that's not vaccinated or just people in general?
I'm glad to hear you are protected, and thanks for being so honest here on Keeping It 100, because that's what we do. Well, hello there. Welcome to Keeping It 100, where we have these open and honest conversations about health topics that matter to our community. I am your host, Dr. Kristin Motley, and as always, we have a really good show in store for you today. During the show, you may think of questions. You may want to give yourself a shout out or say hi to us. Please just drop it in the chat. Let us know you're here. My very good friend, Dr. Renee Jones, is on the ones and twos today. So she'll be in the chat, making sure your questions get answered and sharing some really good information there. So let's just go ahead and bring in Georgie Mink Jr. G.
Hey. Street practitioner in the building.
The street practitioner sound a little congested.
Yeah, I got a little something going on. It's not COVID. I took a test yesterday and today.
You better have a protocol. That's what I'm talking about. A testing protocol.
Yeah. I've been testing. I tested twice, but it's just sinus stuff going on. There's a lot of sinusy. I got allergies, doc. So
it's a lot going on. How are you feeling? Like aside from the
I actually feel better. Mm-hmm. Like, this is like I can tell it's on the downfall.
Okay. It's on its way out.
Yeah, so I don't need a doctor visit yet. But if it goes past 72 hours, I'll give you a call.
Call me.
All right. Okay.
Wait. Are you taking anything? Or are you just letting it?
I was taking some type of sinus, I forgot what it was called. It's like everything for sinus issues, like sinus headaches, congestion. I'll send you over what I'm taking, doc, because I know you like to check those things out.
Please, and send the expiration date. People be pulling stuff out of their medicine cabinet that expired like 10 years ago.
That's true.
So when I used to do home visits, my favorite thing was going through them cabinets, the drawers, and pulling out and getting rid of all that expired med, all those expired meds, because they're not going to work. They may have a little potency in them, depending on how long they've been in there, but you just need to like clean out that 10-year-old stuff and get up. So yes, please send me what you're taking, and I want to see the expiration date as well. And I was thinking of something else. And what you said made me think of something else. The fact that you're not exactly sure what you're taking concerns me, because if you had to go to the hospital for something and they need to know what you're taking, you should know that. So I'll say take a picture of it and have it in your phone. So you don't have to remember it, but at least take a picture so that if you have to go to the ER for any reason, you can just pull up the picture and they'll see what you're taking.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, doc.
Yeah, I got you. But I'm glad you're feeling all right. So that's a good thing. I have a little health update for myself. So I finally found the OBGYN. I was looking for a Black OBGYN because my previous one left. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do with my female parts when you leave? So I haven't had one for a couple years, and I finally found the Black one. So went to my appointment, and she shared a few tips that I hadn't heard before. So I wanted to share it with my ladies. Dr. Jones, you'll appreciate this, and feel free to unmute if you want to share anything. But she said to always do your mammograms and your self-exams after your period ends. Now, we talked about that on the show when we did the breast cancer awareness show with Les. So we talked about that. But then she also said we talked about doing the self-exam once the period ends, but not the mammogram. So she said do the mammogram too, because that's when your hormone levels are back to normal and you can see the tissue much better. So when you're getting your annual mammograms done, ladies, and when you're doing your monthly self-exams, make sure you do that after your period ends. She also said the same is true if you have to get a pelvic exam. So uterine fibroids are common in Black women, and we're going to do a whole show on that. I've had fibroid tumors. They're removed. I have a couple small ones that are still there. So I have to get a pelvic ultrasound so that they can see if there has been any growth. And she said to always schedule your pelvic ultrasounds after your period as well. She said that's the best time to do all those exams. It makes it the tissue is much easier seen when your hormone levels are back, to normal. So make sure you follow that, ladies, when you're scheduling your stuff. So I have a pelvic ultrasound coming up. I'm gonna call and get that scheduled today. Another tip she said, so she had to do a pelvic exam, and she said you should urinate before your pelvic exam because the bladder sits in front of the uterus or something like that. And it's easier for her to feel the organs when your urine is not in your body and your bladder is empty. So make sure you urinate before your pelvic exam, before you get your pap smear, and then they can do the check-in and make sure that everything is all good. So I just wanted to let y'all know because that's what I learned. So what I learned, y'all learn, and we all get better together.
Nice.
Yeah. I'll share some prostate tips when Bilal gets his prostate exam done. I ain't got nothing for my guys. I ain't got nothing for my guys yet, but it's coming.
Right.
It's coming.
Right, it's coming.
So we've been looking at booster numbers, and boosters in the U.S. is still a struggle. I mean, it's probably a struggle everywhere, but I've just been looking in the U.S. And the percentage of people that have their boosters last week, it was only about 8%, so 20 million people, and that's pretty low. Gee, why do you think people not getting their boosters? Like, what's going on? What the streets saying?
What's going on with the streets? What I've been hearing is that they don't really think COVID is a big thing anymore. It's not being promoted. It's not even the news. It used to be a news headline every day.
Yeah.
So it's like in people's mind, that's pretty much the way they pretty much was relating to COVID through the news.
Yeah.
So
I can see that.
It's like since the news is not making a big thing about it, until they have it. Now people still catching it. Like it's not stopping the spread. But as far as the booster and people feeling the need to get boosted and to get vaccinated, it's starting to deteriorate in the mindset.
I can see that. Yeah. I can see that being, because the news is picking up politics right now. It's election season. We had a big election yesterday. So the news is going to pick up what's the new thing that's happening. And I guess we can't. So that teaches us a couple lessons. Like we can't depend on the news media to tell us how important the health topic is. Like we know COVID was here. It hit us like crazy. We know it's important. And I think we just need to stay vigilant. Like the news isn't covering cancer deaths and it's not covering heart attack deaths and stroke deaths, but those are still the leading causes of death for Americans, and for Black people is worse than any other group. And the news isn't covering that. So we have to remember that although it's not on the news, it still exists, and we still have to take precautions and do what we can to not be the group of people who has the worst outcomes and everything. Like we have to do something about that. And it hurts me that we are at such a place that we can't trust the government, that we feel like we can't trust our healthcare providers. We can't trust the pharmaceutical industry. And I totally get that. And it just hurts that that's where we are, because that's what's prevented so many of us from making a decision to even get one dose of the vaccine. And then we're not vaccinating our kids. And it's terrible because dying from COVID is preventable. We are back to living our best lives because of the vaccine. It's no other reason. COVID ain't go nowhere. COVID trying to get better. COVID is getting smarter and learning how to get around the vaccine. And so that's why we're having to get boosters and having to get other stuff, because COVID is getting smarter while we're not doing enough. Enough of us aren't doing enough to protect ourselves. And it's just sad.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what they talking about. And, but again, I still been promoting it. I did actually talk to his brother and his son into getting boosted. And, you know, he thanked me the next time he saw me. So, I mean, we still out here, Doc.
You
Oh,
doing
shout out to
it.
Carol Kazim, too, for winning state rep
Congratulations,
159 for
Carol.
Black Sister Power. Y'all moving.
Yes.
Like, I'm proud of my Black sisters and my queens this year. Y'all showing out.
Yes.
I can't even. I gotta give it up. Like,
You
keep
doing
doing
it.
your
You
thing.
doing it.
Yeah.
Good job, Carol. Congratulations. I know that wasn't it. It's not easy getting into politics, and it's not easy. So I know, you know, the struggle has paid off for you so far. So just get up in Harrisburg and do what you do, girl. Do what you
She gonna
do.
shake it up. She gonna shake it up. It's all
Yes.
right. That's what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the other thing that I want to mention is that flu cases are rising and people have been getting sick from the flu this year. We don't usually expect a rise in the flu until about like December, January, February, but flu is already doing its thing and people are getting sick. So make sure you get your flu shot, you get your COVID and your flu shot at the same time. I got mine at the same time. It's like nothing. And just make sure you had a protection. And right now you have enough time to be protected in time for the holidays. Like, you know, Thanksgiving is coming up, Christmas, holiday parties and get-togethers and gatherings. It's a lot. So this is a perfect time. You still well above 2 weeks to get the protection in. As long as you get it done this week, you'll be good and protected and protecting your family members as best as you can. All we can do is our best. That's all we can do. And it is these vaccines that have helped us to overcome these things. We can't ignore that. Like, we can't act like it just is a miracle that just came out of somewhere, that people not dying from COVID by the thousands like they were. They're still dying. It's just by the hundreds now, but it was by the thousands every day. It was scary. It's the vaccines that have brought us there. Let's keep it 100. Let's keep it 100.
Yeah.
I do want to mention that Pfizer is working on a combination shot with the flu shot and COVID shot, I guess for next year, but I saw that they were working on coming up with a combination. So you only get one shot for the flu and COVID protection, which will be pretty cool.
Right. They getting fly over there.
They combine.
Wow.
I mean,
I see.
It's not uncommon, you know, when kids get their vaccines, it's typically 3 or 4 different vaccinations in one shot. So it's not uncommon to do that. I just thought it was kind of interesting because the COVID shots are made with mRNA technology, and the flu shot doesn't use that technology. So I was kind of interested in seeing how they plan to make it work together before I get it. I need some answers. So, you know, we're going to probably going to bring in Dr. Kalechi to come in and talk to us about what they doing in the lab and how they making that work. Because we ain't just going to be signing up, getting a COVID combination flu without telling us something about it. So they have time to work on that. Another thing that's going around, so we got COVID, we got flu, and then RSV. So that's been getting a lot of attention lately. A lot of the children's hospitals are filling up with kids sick with RSV. That's what we're here to talk about today. So I want to bring in our amazing guest, Donna Carson Williams. She is a Chester native, a proud Clipper, and a licensed practical nurse. She has been in the healthcare industry for over 23 years. She's worked for many years as a pediatric nurse and has extensive experience working with medically complex pediatric patients. Donna is my girl. I'm so glad that she was available to join us today. She has worked at a children's hospital, and so she knows exactly what's happening right in the doctor's offices and what's going on and what's what. So we wanted to bring her in to talk to us about RSV today. So thanks for coming on, Donna.
Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone.
Hey, Donna.
Hey, girl. So I guess our first question is, what is up with RSV? So we know it's not new. If y'all been watching the show, my son got it the first week of daycare back in June. So he got it over the summer. But why is everybody talking about RSV now? Like, what's happening?
I think most people don't get tested for RSV. RSV is like a common cold. So our children get a cold, we take care of runny nose, fever, congestion, all those things. That is what the same symptoms as a common cold. So most people don't go get their children checked out, or even adults don't get checked out. But because we're testing so much for any virus like COVID and flu, RSV is coming up. So that's why most people now know they have RSV, which they didn't. Like, a lot of people walk around with RSV and just don't know they just got a cold or allergies.
That's a good point, because the only reason why we knew that Noah had it was because they tested him for flu, COVID, and RSV, and he came back positive for RSV. So that's a good point. So we just hadn't been testing for it. So people could have had it, but we wasn't testing. But because we're testing for COVID and flu anyway, we throwing the RSV in there, and now we finding out. But it seems like people are really getting sick from it now. Like, they're in the hospital. So what do you think is going on with that? Like, what's driving those hospital cases?
I think their immune system is so weak because of COVID. And, since COVID's been around, RSV has been extremely high. RSV has been high over the last 2.5 years, where we were actually giving the preemies the vaccines earlier. Normally we start the vaccines in October, but because RSV has been so high over the last two COVID years, we've been giving RSV vaccines early as July and August, because the levels are the systems are so high. Like, the kids are just getting very sick. And I think it's more because the way COVID hit, and it just hits everybody's immune system, it weakened everybody's immune system. And even if people didn't get tested for COVID, they still, for a long time, people had COVID and we didn't know.
Yeah.
So their immune system has been weakened, and we just didn't know why.
That makes sense. All right. Well, then, in terms of people having to go to the hospital for RSV, what kinds of differences have been seen for Black children? We're always talking about disparities that impact the Black community. Has there been any disparities in terms of RSV outcomes, like deaths or hospitalizations are higher in children that are Black?
I haven't seen, most of the population that's really been getting sick from RSV it's just been across the board what we've seen. For whatever reason, I'm not sure why. Because here's the thing: before, it used to be it was a lot of disparities because a lot of African Americans didn't like to get vaccines, right? They didn't get vaccines. So all the Caucasian people, other nationalities were getting their kids vaccinated. So then there was like this, this big gap. But most people aren't even getting their kids vaccinated. So it's not just a Black and a white thing anymore. It's an overall education of why vaccines work for your kids, or why, you need to take, especially since COVID has been out here, and the flu, why you need to take these proper steps to make sure your kids are okay. The most thing that we've seen, the reason why kids are really getting RSV is because of asthma, and the kids' lungs are terrible because parents are smoking. There's a lot of different reasons why their immune system and their lungs are so weak. And as kids, they're fragile. RSV for adult, like, it's a common cold. So a lot of adults didn't even know that they had RSV until they were tested for COVID and the flu. So now it's like, oh, adults are getting it. No, adults have had RSV since RSV been around. But our immune system we're stronger. We're less fragile than the kids.
Yeah. And I guess too, we've been exposed to it year after year after year after year. And so we probably have a little protection from those previous years of exposure. So RSV is a thing that impacts kids more than it impacts adults, right?
Yeah.
What about the symptoms of RSV? You had mentioned that it's like a common cold. What are some of the symptoms that people experience where they may want to consider if they have like RSV or not?
Right. So RSV, the symptoms are pretty much like a cold or flu. That's the concern, especially in younger children, because we don't necessarily know what you're dealing with at first. So you think it's like, oh, it's just a common cold, runny nose, congestion, fever, headaches. But a lot of things, a lot of viruses can cause that, right? Ear
Yeah.
infections will cause you runny nose, congestion, and things like that. So what happens is when you start to get, shorter breath, then that's the issue. If you start to, parents start to see that their children struggling to breathe, or a headache that's lasting longer, then the typical will, just have a little headache like 48 to 72 hours. If it's lasting longer than that, and along with the runny nose, congestion, the cough, the shortness of breath, then you definitely know that there's something more than a cold. A cold, a typical cold usually lasts about 3 to 5 days. But the fever you may spike a high fever, but you kind of stay around the low grade fever part with a cold. But when you have RSV, because it affects so many things, that the temperature is higher, the fever is higher.
Yeah. So how do you know when it's time to take your child to the hospital? I remember with Noah, we didn't know what it was. He just had a temperature. And so we were trying to manage the temperature at home. And he still had a temperature after like 4 days. And I was like, this is weird. So then we took him in. We took him to his doctor. We didn't take him to the ER or anything. We took him to his doctor. And then she did the test. But I'm wondering, when should parents be like more concerned that it's not just like a regular cold?
I think that it's shown that the first 48 hours is a tell sign. So how they do the first 48 hours at home, if you're giving Tylenol or ibuprofen, is the fever going down, and how soon is the fever coming back before you get the next dose, if there's a breakthrough fever before the next dose. Also, if they seem like they just really can't catch their breath. So RSV mucus is different than a common cold though. So RSV mucus is really thick, and that's what prevents the breathing more than a common cold, because it's hard for you to breathe with all this extra mucus. So it's like this. It's a lot of mucus with RSV, and it's much thicker. So if you notice that the child is, after 48 hours, they're having a little bit more trouble breathing, like they really can't get their stuff together. If they're not able to speak or even like cry without, those things, like, it's time to go to the next step. And again, as you mentioned, the fever, if the fever, 2 to 3 days for a fever, okay. But once it goes further than that, it's like, there's something really going on, and we really need to figure out what exactly it is.
Wow. Well, what about as far as the risk, like for death? Like, how far does it go for fatalities?
So just like the flu and COVID, if it's treated, they'll do fine. So if it gets to the point where you have to go to the hospital, they're going to do the same thing they do for COVID. They're going to do, if you have to go on a ventilator, they're going to do, all these different treatments. And the outcomes for RSV is still on the positive side versus the COVID and the flu. Because RSV, again, it's not as bad as the flu. It's not. But because children are so high risk because of their immune system, they tend to, if your child goes to the ER and they get admitted, 9 times out of 10, if they're getting admitted, they're normally getting admitted to the ICU or something, because it's that bad. Because with RSV, they will send you home with it. It's not something that, unless you can't breathe.
Yeah. And then one other thing was the dehydration too. So I know that one of the things that was a big deal for Noah was he didn't want to eat. And so we were trying to get him to eat, and we called the nursing line. They said, don't worry about him eating, just make sure he drinks. And Bilal was like chasing after this boy, trying to get him to eat. And I was like, you are traumatizing him. He does not want to eat. Stop making him eat. Just as long as he drinks, he's fine. So he was drinking and peeing. So he probably went about 2 or 3 days and didn't eat anything. It was driving Bilal crazy. I was like, you are stressing me out. Sit down somewhere. So the dehydration is a big deal too. So make sure if your child is sick, cold, flu, or whatever it is, that you keep them dehydrated, because that's the other thing that could lead them to having to go to the hospital um, for treatment. The other thing that I wanted to mention about the deaths, George, you had asked, Dr. Jones had put in the chat that kids 1 month to a year old, RSV is estimated to cause more deaths than any other single infection except malaria. And we don't have to worry about malaria here. So that's a big deal. The good thing is that it's less deaths than the flu and it's less deaths than COVID, but it's still a big deal. And it's really no way to prevent it, really, because kids get it just from doing what kids do. Putting stuff in their mouth, being around someone that's infected, coughing, it just spreads so like easily. And with us having had wearing masks for the last 2 years, you didn't see as many cases as you're seeing now, because all those prevention measures are gone. So now all these viruses are back and they living their best life. And that's why you see the flu acting up, RSV acting up, COVID still doing this thing. We just got to do our best to stay protected, really.
You know what I think is interesting is that we do have an RSV vaccine, right? And it's only given to premature babies, but not all premature babies get it either. There's a certain criteria that you have to meet, requirements that you have to meet to actually get the vaccine. And you know that vaccine works for those premature babies, right? So my concern is that, okay, RSV is so prevalent now. Like, why are we not pushing to get RSV vaccines for we know the age group from birth to a year old is like the most critical point, and these kids are really getting sick. So why not allow? And I know the vaccine is very expensive because we have to do all these extra prior authorizations, and they have to do A, B, and C to get it. And then and again, not all preemies qualify for it, but I think there definitely should be a push, because we've seen RSV like just through the roof. And if there's a vaccine that can protect this population, we should be able to use that vaccine to the other.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Now, I know that in Europe, they just approved our RSV vaccine over there. And I didn't know that we had one over here at all. So I'm glad that you knew that and was able to share it, so that if anyone has a child who is premature, you can make sure that you are talking to the pediatricians in the hospital to make sure that checking to see if your child qualifies for the RSV vaccine. Now, I know that they are working on getting one approved here in the US, and I believe that at least 2 drug companies, I think it's GSK and Pfizer, have applications in with the FDA for approval, and I think that they're pretty close to getting approved. They have been working on those for years. So I think what you're asking for, Donna, is like right around the corner. It's coming. Yeah, it's coming. Did you have another question, G?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of answered it in the beginning, but I wanted to know, why is it such a big thing now? Like, if it's been going on for years, I mean, especially in our community. Like, I talked to a brother, he said his son was diagnosed with it, and he just was like, where did it come from? Like, we never really heard of this in our community.
It's all about testing. Everything that we know is testing. And if you don't have access to testing, we won't know.
Right. So, but you won't.
Doctors aren't testing.
But you won't be able to get tested unless you have symptoms. I mean, because normally he said they would just go to the doctors and they would just say that they had the flu or they had some other type of illness. Right. Mm-hmm. It would never be diagnosed. He just wanted to know, why is it being called this now? Like, when it's basically seemed like it's the same thing that's been going on for years.
I think, again, because we start testing for COVID and the flu, they start seeing that as they're testing for COVID and flu, they're testing and they're seeing RSV. So now they're really concerned. It's like, okay, hey, there's a lot of positive tests for RSV. We need to figure out why. So now everybody's getting tested for RSV because we've seen it in COVID. So I think it's all about healthcare already knew RSV was around, but again, it really hasn't affected adults or even kids, like really kind of over the age 5. RSV, because we treat it as, oh, you got a cold, you got allergies, because again, all the symptoms are the same.
Yeah.
So I think once we started testing for COVID and flu, and we're like, oh wait, there's a lot more people with RSV and they're really getting sick. So we have to make sure that everybody's getting tested.
Yeah. And I think a part of why we're hearing about it now is because it's filling up the hospital. So again, whatever is happening and the news is catching it, then the news tells us, and then we are informed. Perhaps we weren't hearing about it as much because it wasn't on the news and the news wasn't covering it because it just wasn't a story at the time. But I think that because the hospitals are filling up and the news is picking up on it, then we're hearing about it. And I think that the hospitals are picking up because more people have it, because we have relaxed the COVID protocols that have been in place for the last 2 years. So now you have more people having it, and it means that more people will be sick, and a percentage of the people that get sick will go to the hospital. That's just how the numbers work. So a percentage of the people that get RSV are expected to be hospitalized. So you just, because of the number of cases, I think it's driving the hospitalizations, which drives the news, which drives what we know. But I think for us, we need to be keeping track of this stuff regardless of what the news is saying, because we are impacted by things where we just always get like the worst outcomes. And so we just have to stay up on it, and we have to stay vigilant, and we can't expect the news to cover health topics that matter to us. And so that's why we're here on Keeping It 100, because that's what we do. We cover health topics that matter to our community. So make sure y'all tuning in and telling your friends to tune in, because we have to keep these conversations going. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you, Donna, I love calling the nurse line at my kids' doctor's office because the nurses be on point. And one thing that I love is that they're not always pushing, like, take this drug, take this medication. They're like, turn on the faucet, put it on hot, put that child in the bathroom for 15 minutes. Take a lemon, squeeze it over his head. Like they always have some natural remedies. And so I wanted you to share, just kind of go through the symptoms and share what can parents do to manage their kids' RSV at home, because most kids won't go to the hospital. So what can they do to manage at home? Let's just start with the runny nose. Come on, pediatric nurse.
Runny nose, typically what we tell parents to do, just normal saline. You want to break down that, the mucus and stuff that's coming through the nose, and saline salt that kind of breaks down everything. So runny nose, we typically tell them just to rinse, a saline rinse, no drugs or anything, just a saline rinse, just to keep it clear and thin, so that whatever virus it is, it comes out the body. Like, runny nose is not a bad thing. Like, it needs to run out, it needs to find somewhere to go, right? The issue is that when a runny nose is so copious, it's like thick. So in order, you need to do just normal saline.
Okay, so you can get that right in the pharmacy over the counter, and that's just salt and water. It's pretty much what it is.
Or you can make
your own normal saline. Dr. Jones, can we get a normal saline recipe in the chat, please? Drop a recipe in the chat for us. Thank you. All right, now what about chest congestion?
Okay, so that's the one right there, because a lot of parents, from old school, we know that you got some chest congestion, you need to take some cold medicine, some congestions, but we know that in children particularly under the age 5, that's really not that good, because you don't want to suppress a cough. You really don't, because the cough is helping getting it out. So what you want to do is you still just want to make them more comfortable. So, we typically tell our parents, if they got a cough and they're crying about a cough, like Tylenol or Motrin, just to make it a little bit more comfortable, because they really need to cough to get it out.
But I'm talking about the congestion, like when you cough and you just hear like all that.
That's that saline. Yeah. So the same thing. It's the saline. As you're doing a normal saline in the nose, it goes down to the chest. And another thing that we tell parents to do, ginger, honey, those things like that. Tea. Children, they can still have tea. So we tell them ginger, honey, Also, as you mentioned earlier, go in the bathroom, hot water, let that steam start to break it up, because that's what's going to break up the congestion. It's the steam in it, and then also the steam.
So she told me that. I was like, who gonna pay this light bill once I got this water running in my shower? So I actually did that with Noah. So he was asleep. So I put a mat down and I laid them on the floor right in the bathroom, and I just let the shower run and let that steam, like have him breathing all that steam, and it helps the congestion. It helps to loosen it up. It helps it to come up. I think he stayed in there for about 10 or 15 minutes or something like that, but it was helpful.
And they have now, Kristin, the other thing about that is that, so as the steam is gone, they have these Vicks pods. You know, we used to, like, they're shower pods, like you just throw in a shower, and they're Vicks, and they have like they have some eucalyptus ones or whatever that helps open it up as well.
Yeah, that's true too.
Essential oil. So before we didn't have that, we had the Vicks where we had to sit next to it, you know, the little humidifier. But now they actually, you could throw them in a shower, so as the shower steaming, it helps open them up as well.
Now, do you recommend the Vicks rub on the kids? Like, I know there was some controversy around that.
So the problem with the Vicks was what was happening is that people were lathering this on their kids, and we know that Vicks, it opens up the chest, so it opens it up to more viruses too, because you're taking you're not staying in the house. Most people aren't, you know, giving them Vicks, and they're staying in the house and things like that. They're traveling around with all this Vicks on their chest. They're open, so it opens up a chance to have more viruses. So we don't recommend at the doctor's office any Vicks on vapor rub on any children.
Okay. But I know y'all still gonna do it because that's what y'all mamas did and that's what your grandmamas did. But it's just not recommended. And I don't know, and Dr. Jones can check, but I thought there was something about menthol in the Vicks getting absorbed into the children's blood system. I'm not sure, but if you find something, Dr. Jones, just drop it in the chat. I'm not trying to spread no myths, but I feel like I remember reading something about that years ago. So if you find something, drop it. If you don't, just say I'm wrong, and it's all good. Now, you said for a cough, they can do honey and lemon and tea.
Ginger.
Honey and lemon and tea. Oh, ginger and honey helps with the cough, right?
And then, and also, so there are so many remedies, like we know that pineapple juice helps with lungs and help you breathe. We know that cinnamon. So, you know, it's literally just making a concoction of tea that has all these natural remedies in there, natural herbs that help us. You know, cinnamon. Yeah, I sprinkle cinnamon on everything just because my kids have asthma.
Okay. I know that it also, you have to take enough of it, but it can also help to lower blood sugar too. For people that have like diabetes is another thing that it's cinnamon is helpful for. But okay, so we can do our concoction. We can do tea, put some pineapple juice in there, put some cinnamon, ginger, honey, and that'll help with cough and congestion for the kids. Okay. All right, nice. Now I would recommend a herbal tea only because I don't like to give my kids caffeine because then they be up all night and I don't got time for that. So I would not do a black tea. I would not do like a Lipton. I would do a herbal tea that does not have caffeine. And that's how I would run that back for sure. Now, I wanted to ask about fever. Now, I know for fever, you got to take something. So what's the recommendation for managing a fever? And at what temperature do you need to, is there like a temperature cutoff, or how do you know when you need to give someone something for a fever?
So 100.1 is considered a fever. Anything under 100 is not really considered a fever unless your special needs and your body temperature is normally just way lower than that. But 100.1 is considered a low grade fever. You're just coming into the fever zone. Depending on the symptom of the child, out is if you want to give something, so if there's a lot of, again, if we have any symptoms of runny nose, congestion, we know that the fever is coming from some type of thing, some type of virus or whatever. So you want to get a head start on that. So start giving Tylenol or ibuprofen as early as 100.1 because you know that there's something else coming up from behind.
Okay. So 100.1 Tylenol or Motrin. I know that there are places that say to switch between the two.
Oh,
What
yes.
does your office recommend?
So over the years, before it was like either you take Tylenol or you take ibuprofen, but now we saw, because the breakthroughs in the fever from dose to dose, and like if Tylenol is given, well, there are different types of Tylenol now, but if Tylenol is given every 4 hours, and we were seeing breakthrough before the 4 hours, we're recommended that you do ibuprofen in between, because it's every 6 hours. So basically every 3 hours your child is getting something. Just to keep it, but you still have to be careful with that, because as we use Tylenol and ibuprofen, we could be masking something that's really bad. So I think as we're doing ibuprofen and Tylenol, we still have to keep an eye on the other symptoms, so that we're not just completely covering everything up.
Covering something else that could be going on. That could be a big thing. I think the biggest thing is to make sure you're talking to your child's pediatrician about this too, just to make sure that what we're sharing here is right for your child, because everybody's different. So always make sure you call the nursing line or call the pediatrician office and ask them what do they recommend. And you can take a few of the suggestions that we shared and ask your own child's provider, can my child do this? Because I heard this on Keeping It 100 and they said I should do this. Is this something that I should do for my child? And have them tell you yes or no. And if they say no, then you just ask why not, because it helps you to understand why and how these decisions are made, and you should know that. So this was good. This was good. Thanks, Donna.
That's good stuff.
I don't have any more questions. I think we can wrap this one up. So thanks again for coming on, Donna G. Thanks for pushing through. I know you're not 100%, but you came through. So thanks, G. I just want to make a couple announcements. We will be at Chester Community Charter School this evening for their parent engagement night. So thanks, G, for hooking us up with that. That's going on from 5:30 to 7:30 at their Aston campus. So we'll be doing some outreach and education there this evening. We also have a flu and COVID vaccine clinic scheduled for the High's first basketball game of the season. So that'll be at Chester High School on Friday, December 2nd that evening. So come through and get your COVID shot, your first, your second, your booster, flu shot, whatever y'all want, we got it. Bring the kids and come through and protect yourselves, protect your family. This is already looking like it's going to be a crazy viral season with flu, COVID, RSV. It's just too much. Get yourself protected. So that's all I got. So we will see y'all next week right here on cmpradio.net. Check out Keeping It 100 next week. See y'all.
All right. Thank you.
Good night.
And so I think it's important that you understand the clinical trial process. I'm not saying that the pill is bad. I just want you to think about